I came home after a brutal night shift, my body heavy, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, dreaming only of a hot shower and a few hours of silence. The city was still half asleep, wrapped in that pale gray light before sunrise. I remember thinking how peaceful everything looked, how different it felt from the chaos inside the hospital where I had just spent 12 exhausting hours on my feet. But the peace ended the moment I stepped into my building. My suitcase, my winter coats, my shoes, my personal things, scattered right there in the entrance hallway. At first, I thought I was mistaken. Maybe someone was moving, maybe the neighbors had placed their boxes temporarily. But then I saw my name written on one of the storage containers in black marker. My hands started shaking, and then I heard her voice. "Oh, you're finally here," my mother-in-law said sweetly from the doorway of my apartment. "Your things are in the hallway. Take them, dear, dear." She said it like we were discussing tea. I stood frozen. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by disbelief. "What do you mean my things are in the hallway?" She leaned casually against the doorframe as if she owned the place. "Well, since this is my son's apartment, and you clearly don't appreciate him, we decided it's better if you live somewhere else." We decided. I felt something break inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet crack of understanding. My husband had known. He had agreed. Just hours before, I had been caring for patients, working overtime to help pay our bills, believing I was building a future with a man who respected me. And now, after a night shift, I was being evicted from my own home without warning. I walked past her without answering and stepped into the apartment. My heart pounded. The walls looked the same. The furniture was still there. But something had changed. It felt like a stranger's house. "Where is he?" I asked. "At work," she replied. He didn't want unnecessary drama. Of course, I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity was too much to process. Unnecessary drama, as if throwing my belongings into a public hallway at 6 in the morning wasn't drama. As if humiliating me in front of neighbors wasn't drama. As if betrayal was just a minor inconvenience. I walked into the bedroom. My closet was empty, my side of the dresser cleared. Even the framed photo from our wedding was gone. I felt cold, not angry yet, just cold. "You should be grateful," she continued, stepping inside. "Many women would be happy to have a husband like my son. But you're always working, always tired. A wife should take care of her home." There it was, the real reason. My night shifts, my independence, my salary, my refusal to become a silent housekeeper. I turned to her slowly. "I pay half of the mortgage," I said quietly. She smiled, that tight, victorious smile. "Yes, half, but the apartment is in his name." That's when the anger finally arrived. Not loud, not hysterical, but sharp. He had insisted on registering the apartment in his name, for convenience. I had trusted him. We were married. Why would I question it? Because trust without protection is naive. I walked back into the living room and sat down on the couch. She looked confused. "What are you doing?" "Resting," I replied. "I just finished a 12-hour shift." She crossed her arms. "You can rest somewhere else." I looked at her calmly. No, that single word shifted the atmosphere. She wasn't expecting resistance. She expected tears, begging, maybe shouting, but not calm refusal. "You have no right to stay here," she snapped. I pulled out my phone. "Actually," I said, "I do. I am legally married to your son. This is the marital home. You cannot throw me out without a court order." Her face changed, because she didn't think I knew that. She assumed exhaustion would make me weak. She assumed humiliation would make me obedient. She underestimated me. "I will call him," she threatened. "Please do." She dialed his number immediately. I could hear her exaggerated sighs. "She refuses to leave." "Yes," I told her. "Yes, she's being difficult." Difficult. A woman defending her home is always labeled difficult. She handed me the phone. His voice was distant, impatient. "Why are you making a scene?" "A scene? I came home and found my belongings in the hallway," I said steadily. "Explain to me how that is not a scene." He paused. "We talked about this," he said. "You're never home. My mother needs space. It's temporary. Temporary. Without conversation, without agreement, without respect. I contribute financially," I reminded him. "I've invested years into this marriage. And I've invested into this apartment," he replied sharply. There it was again. Ownership. Control. Not partnership. I realized in that moment that this wasn't sudden. This was planned. He didn't argue with his mother, he aligned with her. And maybe he always had. I ended the call. I stood up. I walked to the hallway and began bringing my things back inside. One by one, slowly, deliberately. She watched in disbelief. "You can't just ignore our decision." "I can," I answered. "Because you don't have legal authority here." My neighbors were peeking from their doors. Yes, it was embarrassing. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't ashamed anymore. I wasn't the one who threw belongings into the hallway. They were. After moving everything inside, I locked the door. Then I looked at her. "You have two options," I said calmly. "You leave now, or I call the police for unlawful eviction attempt." She gasped. "The police? Against family?" "Yes, because respect is not automatically granted by family ties. It is earned." She stormed out, muttering insults under her breath. And suddenly, the apartment was quiet. But it was not peaceful. I sat on the floor surrounded by my boxes. And finally, I allowed myself to cry. Not because I was homeless. Not because I was scared. But because I understood the truth. This marriage was over, not in a dramatic explosion, but in that quiet hallway moment when I saw my life packed into boxes. Later that day, I contacted a lawyer. I learned something important. Even if the apartment is registered in one spouse's name, assets acquired during marriage can still be considered joint property depending on jurisdiction. He thought paperwork would silence me. But paperwork works both ways. In the following weeks, the mask fell completely. He accused me of being career-obsessed. His mother called me selfish. They expected me to apologize. Instead, I gathered documents. Bank statements, transfer records, mortgage payments, every receipt, every contribution. I stopped arguing emotionally. I started acting strategically. That scared them more than tears ever could. The divorce process wasn't easy. It was exhausting, but I was already used to exhaustion. Night shifts had trained me to survive on little sleep and high pressure. And unlike my marriage, my career respected my effort. In court, the narrative changed. From ungrateful wife to financial contributor. From dramatic woman to co-owner. And while I won't share every legal detail, I will say this. He didn't walk away with everything. And neither did I, but I walked away with dignity. Months later, I moved into a smaller apartment. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't perfect, but every corner of it was mine. No one could pack my belongings and place them in a hallway. No one could decide my worth. The most painful part wasn't losing a husband. It was realizing I had ignored red flags for years. The jokes about my salary. The subtle comments about real wives. The constant comparison to women who stayed home. Love without respect is a slow erosion. And exhaustion can make you tolerate what you shouldn't. If you're watching this and you feel unseen in your own home. If you're contributing but being treated as temporary. If your effort is minimized. Remember this moment. The hallway full of boxes was not my humiliation. It was my awakening. They thought they were removing me. In reality, they pushed me toward freedom. Sometimes the door that slams in your face is the one that saves you. And sometimes coming home after a night shift becomes the beginning of your new life. I no longer work night shifts. Not because someone demanded it, but because I chose balance for myself. I no longer ask permission to rest in my own space. I no longer shrink to make others comfortable. And if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Never sign your independence away for the promise of love. Partnership is built on respect, not ownership. And no one, not even family, has the right to throw you out of your own life. If this story resonated with you, share it. Because someone out there is standing in a hallway right now, staring at their belongings, thinking they have no power. They do. They just haven't realized it yet. When the door closed behind my mother-in-law, the silence inside the apartment felt heavier than any argument. My hands were still trembling, but my mind had become strangely clear. I didn't sleep that morning. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cup of coffee growing cold in front of me, replaying everything. The hallway full of boxes. Her smile. His voice on the phone. It wasn't just about an apartment. It was about erasure. They had tried to erase me from my own life. By noon, exhaustion finally forced me to lie down, but even then, sleep didn't bring peace. I kept seeing neighbors' doors half open, curious eyes watching as I carried my belongings back inside. I had always tried to be polite, quiet, invisible. And yet, humiliation had found me anyway. When I woke up in the afternoon, I didn't feel weak. I felt focused. The first thing I did was take photos. Every box placed outside, the empty closet, the missing wedding photo. I documented everything. Not out of revenge, but out of preparation. If they were capable of this, they were capable of more. My husband came home that evening. He didn't look guilty. He looked irritated. "You've made things worse," he said as he walked in. "Worse." I looked at him carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. "You mean I didn't leave quietly?" I replied. He sighed and dropped his keys on the table. "You could have handled this calmly." "Calmly?" I asked. "You and your mother put my belongings in the hallway without telling me." He ran a hand through his hair. "You're exaggerating. It wasn't that dramatic." That was his strategy: minimize, dismiss, reframe. For years, I had accepted it. If he forgot something important, I was too sensitive. If I felt hurt, I was overreacting. If I defended myself, I was starting conflict. But something had changed in me. "I'm not leaving," I said firmly. "And if this marriage continues, it will continue with boundaries." He looked surprised. "I rarely spoke like that." "What boundaries?" he asked. "No more decisions about my life without me. No more financial secrecy. And your mother does not enter this apartment without my consent." He laughed. Actually laughed. "You think you can dictate terms now?" "No," I said quietly. "I think I can protect myself now." The conversation ended without resolution. He slept on the couch that night. I didn't feel guilty. Over the next few days, the tension grew thicker. He stopped talking about the incident. Instead, he tried to act as if everything was normal. Small talk, routine questions, surface-level politeness. But I saw it clearly now. He wasn't sorry. He was waiting for me to give in. His mother called him constantly. I could hear her voice through the phone, dramatic sighs, exaggerated complaints, phrases like, "After everything we've done for her." I realized something important. This wasn't just about space. It was about control. As long as I worked night shifts and contributed financially, I had independence. And independence threatened the dynamic they preferred. 3 days later, I met with a lawyer. Sitting in that small office felt surreal. I had never imagined I would discuss my marriage in legal terms. But the lawyer listened carefully, asked precise questions, and explained my rights in detail. "You cannot be removed from the marital home without due process," she said. "And financial contributions matter." For the first time since that morning in the hallway, I felt relief. Facts are powerful. That evening, I informed my husband that I had consulted an attorney. His reaction was immediate. "You're taking this too far," he snapped. "No," I replied. "You already took it too far." He accused me of threatening him, of escalating, of destroying the marriage, but the marriage had been damaged long before I called a lawyer. The hallway was simply the visible crack in a foundation that had been unstable for years. Over the next week, small truths began surfacing. I discovered that he and his mother had discussed my attitude for months. That they believed I was becoming too independent. That they felt I was less feminine because I prioritized work. Less feminine, as if strength had a gender. As if exhaustion from earning money to pay our bills was a character flaw. One night, after another tense dinner, he finally said what he had been holding back. "You've changed," he told me. "Yes," I answered. "I have. You used to be softer. I used to tolerate more." That silenced him. The emotional distance between us became undeniable. We weren't partners anymore. We were opponents sharing a space. 2 weeks after the incident, he made another attempt. This time, it was manipulation disguised as compromise. "Maybe we rushed," he said. "Maybe we can start fresh. But you need to adjust your priorities." Adjust. There it was again. I was the one who needed to bend. "What exactly are you asking?" I asked calmly. "Work fewer shifts. Spend more time at home. My mother feels uncomfortable here." "This is not her home," I replied. "She's my mother. And I am your wife." The difference was clear. One relationship was unconditional in his mind. The other was conditional. That night, I made my decision. Not impulsively, not angrily, but with clarity. I would file for divorce. The paperwork felt heavier than I expected. Not because I doubted my choice, but because it represented the end of a chapter I once believed would last forever. When I handed him the documents, he stared at them in disbelief. "You're serious," he said. "Yes. You're choosing pride over family." "No," I answered. "I'm choosing dignity over control." He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He looked shocked. Perhaps he truly believed I would always stay. That no matter how far he pushed, I would adapt. But there is a limit to adaptation. During the legal process, his tone changed. He became strategic. He suggested dividing things fairly, which conveniently meant in his favor. He claimed the apartment was entirely his responsibility. But I had records. Every transfer, every contribution, every bill. When confronted with documentation, confidence fades quickly. His mother attempted one last confrontation. She came to the apartment, uninvited, and accused me of destroying her son's happiness. I listened quietly. Then I said, "Your son destroyed his own marriage the moment he believed I had no power." She called me selfish. I didn't respond, because sometimes silence is stronger than defense. The court proceedings were not dramatic. No shouting, no public scenes, just structured conversations about assets and rights. But emotionally, it was transformative. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The day the decision was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse and breathed deeply. The air felt different, lighter, not because divorce is easy, but because uncertainty had ended. In the final settlement, I received financial compensation reflecting my contributions. It wasn't everything, it wasn't perfect justice, but it was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement matters. Moving into my new apartment felt strange at first. The rooms were smaller, the furniture mismatched, the walls plain, but there was peace, no tension in the air, no criticism, no unspoken expectations. The first night there, I slept deeply. Not from exhaustion, from relief. I began rebuilding my routine intentionally. I adjusted my work schedule to protect my health. I reconnected with friends I had slowly drifted away from during my marriage. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I had tolerated so much for so long. And the answer wasn't weakness. It was hope. Hope that things would improve. Hope that love would outweigh disrespect. Hope that compromise would eventually be mutual. But hope without boundaries becomes self-neglect. Months later, I ran into a neighbor from the old building. She hesitated before speaking, then said quietly, "I saw what happened that morning. I'm glad you didn't leave." Her words stayed with me. Because that morning could have ended differently. I could have picked up my boxes. I could have walked away silently. I could have accepted humiliation to avoid conflict. And maybe no one would have known. But I would have known. That's the difference. Standing up for yourself isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply refusing to move. Refusing to disappear. Refusing to shrink. Looking back, I don't hate him. I don't hate his mother. They acted according to their beliefs. But I no longer live according to those beliefs. I learned that financial contribution is not just about money, it's about voice. I learned that marriage without respect becomes a hierarchy. And I learned that exhaustion can blur red flags until they become normal. If you ever find yourself doubting your own right to exist in your own space, if someone makes you feel temporary in your own home, if your independence is treated as a threat, pause, ask yourself who benefits from your silence. That hallway full of boxes could have been my ending. Instead, it was my beginning. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was undeniable. Sometimes the most painful mornings reveal the clearest truths. And sometimes losing a marriage is the first step toward finding yourself. I no longer fear coming home. Because home is no longer a place someone can take from me. It's a space I build, protect, and choose. And that makes all the difference.